And that's the important thing. And I think the reason creativity is so important is because I think we're sort of here to express ourselves. And I think, again, the culture paradigm would say, keep it to yourself. Don't let anybody know, follow these rules. And so creativity allows you to jump out of that box in many ways.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we are passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. And we'll give a few recommendations to you, our listeners. Beware, possible spoilers ahead. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast during the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. And as all good stories do, the world got even crazier. But, as Neil Gaiman says, fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. Since I believe that stories have the power to show us the way and give us courage to keep going, I wanted to see if that was true for my guests as well. This is episode 21, and it's a little bit different than the usual Story Power podcasts. Today I'm talking with New York Times best-selling author Pam Grout, and she and I have a conversation about metaphysics, about creativity, about travel, her travel writing, and the cultural stories that we tell each other. So if that is not for you, I just wanted to let you know that up front so that you can go listen to one of the other Story Power episodes, which are available at Apple, Google, or Spotify, or on my website, Sage Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. Today, my guest is Pam Grout. She's an author, a blogger, and I have read 5 of your books, Pam. E Squared, E Cubed, Think and Grow Rich, Art and Soul Reloaded, which my husband and I did for a whole year together. And then I just finished doing the Course in Miracles experiment. I couldn't wait. I bought it in March a year ago, and then I just finished it this March. So now I'm going to go back probably and do the experiments in E Squared and E Cubed until next January when I can start the Course in Miracles experiment again. So, Pam, I am so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm so honored. I get to talk to an acting teacher. How cool is that?
I've been teaching drama and theater for quite a number of years now. But yes, it's very fun. And now I have a co-teacher who is actually a theater professional actor, director, stage manager. And it's so fun to have a team instead of just having to be the one-man show. So I'm really enjoying that. I am so excited to have you on the show because, as I said, I've read 5 of your books. I know you've written more than that. And I love the whole theme of them, that joy is really our home base, I guess I'll call it, instead of suffering, and we suffer and then we die. And I was wondering, how did you come to that conclusion, or how did you realize that we suffer and die is really kind of like a bunch of hooey? How did you figure that out?
I would say that the Course in Miracles was probably my teacher, because that's what it says over and over again, that everything we believe about the world is exactly the opposite of the way the world really is. Right. And I don't know if you read my blog post I wrote this week, but it's almost like we put on this virtual reality headset and we start looking at the world of our creation. We separate out from this, life force that we're all involved in. And then we start looking for problems, and we start believing that our job is to fix all these things and do all these things. So
Right.
I would say I probably, because again, I was enculturated like everybody else, but the Course in Miracles, which I've been studying, doing over and over and over again for so many years. And I would say so many of my books, in fact, even though they don't, like the last one, of course, is Course in Miracles Experiment. So it's obviously about the Course in Miracles. But even all my other books, the one about our thoughts create our reality, those books as well come from things I've learned in Course in Miracles. And I was interested in metaphysical things long before I discovered the Course in Miracles. But I've been doing it now for so long that, not to say that I don't, I don't put the old headset on. The problem, I always call it problem state versus possibility state. And I'm not saying I live in possibility state 24/7, but I make that as my goal. And, like today's Course in Miracles lesson said that they can't be reconciled. You can't be part this way and part that way.
Right.
It's like you're one or the other. It's like a coin, it's either heads or tails. And I think a lot of us spend our entire lives trying to do both. They're trying to, believe in the truth of who we are and also believe in the untruth of who we are, the other story that we've all put in. So I think that's where a lot of conflict comes in because we're not single-minded in our approach to, this particular form of spirituality. And the thing that's really cool about it, according to Course in Miracles, that is the truth. Like, you were talking to what do I call it? But, that is our state of being. That is who we really are. And did we not put the headset on, the cultural headset? That's all we would know. That's all we would be. But again, we all, picked up the story that the ego, the book that I've been working on lately, it's called The Ego's Playbook, or that's what I'm calling it now. And it's basically all these different strategies that the ego said way back when it decided to, get control of our minds, what it was going to do, how it was going to do that. And the biggest one is just to distract us, and to tell us this other story over and over again. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been working on. I had done a few of them for a little promo book to go along with Course in Miracles Experiment, but now I'm doing like the full entire book. And it's really interesting when you think about what the ego has been so successful in convincing us of.
Really? Was there any life experience that kind of started you off on that? The way I was taught isn't quite right. Was there any experience like that?
Well, I grew up as a minister's kid. So, I grew up with a pretty traditional type of religion, which, states all men have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So I was taught that very early on. My family to this day still believes that's, the bottom line truth about the world. And I don't know, I guess the part in my religion that said only those that, believe a certain way are going to heaven, are going to have this, what we say, this eventual joy or this eventual bliss that we're entitled to. And some of these didn't make sense to me. Like, how could, if God is so loving, this God that we're praying to, could he send anybody to hell or, not accept anybody? So that just didn't make sense to me. So I guess that part started seeming a little off when I was really, even when you think about the joy, you think about kids, they come in joyful, they're just completely with the moment, they don't think, oh, I don't know if I can, do this. I'm not sure if I can do it. We learn that that's the cultural programming that we pick up, that headset. So, I don't know. I think probably my first experience was as a child, and then I quickly learned the rules of how you're supposed to be. Right. So, now I'm unlearning the rules like Picasso had said, or even I just did a thing the other day, you might have seen Anthony Hopkins. He said, when I grow up, I want to be a little boy, so when I grow up, I want to be a little girl.
I loved that I loved that blog post. Yeah, that was great. Because that's true. It's true. I'm having to unlearn it too. And I was also a minister's child, but the church.
Oh, wow. What?
Yeah, really. But the church that I grew up in, they were lay ministers. So my dad had his own way of thinking. It wasn't quite what the church, was preaching. And, he was very, very smart about human behavior and why we do what we do. And so I remember when I was a child hearing things like that, like oh, only certain people can go. And I'm thinking, well, why did God create everybody then? I mean, what's the purpose if you're not going to get to go to heaven or whatever it is? And things like the virgin birth, I'm not sure I really believe that. and my dad supported those. He had those same kinds of viewpoints. So I was really fortunate in that. But you're right. There is all that cultural and even religious programming that we get. And so I'm with you. I'm having to unlearn it. And I guess that's why I was so drawn to your books and your blog. And I'm always eager to read them right when I get them.
Oh, thanks.
Because it takes diligence to go, oh, wait a minute. Don't think that. So do you have anything you want to say about your spiritual life? Like when you do get in a funk, how do you get yourself out?
Well, I've just had a recent discovery, and it's actually like an ancient discovery or something I've known forever. Again, as a writer, I have written in my journal for years. I mean, that is really kind of in a way how I would say a lot of my spiritual life even, comes from my journal. And I went on a spell where I just quit journaling and I kind of quit writing of all kinds of writing. And it really kind of turned in on me. So it's like, I guess, if you've read Art and Soul Reloaded, it's like, there's a certain amount of discipline. I kind of don't like that word because it makes it sound too hard or whatever, but it's a matter of consistently setting myself aright or whatever, starting my day on a note where I'm looking for miracles as opposed to looking for problems, or focusing on possibilities as opposed to, focusing on problems. And so it's a real intentional thing that I do. And when I don't do that, it's pretty easy to get off kilter. So I guess, the big things start early in the morning. I do, get off kilter. What the Course in Miracles says, say, Holy Spirit, help me see this differently. And some people may not like that language, but, field of infinite potentiality, which is kind of what I call this life force that, is within all of us, help me see this differently. Obviously, my little headset is crowding in here. My little problem state is trying to crowd into my perception. And this is not what I'm entitled to this other thing. Kind of cool too about the Course in Miracles. You talked about, was it our natural state or whatever? That other life of joy and ease and peace, that's going on. At the same time, we're in this particular frequency. We're noticing the problems, when we get into that. But the other thing is still going on. And that's what's really beautiful about it. So it's a choice of, are we going to be aware of it? Or are we going to, or are we going to separate ourselves out from it? Are we going to be, it's me against the world. You know what I mean? It's like always a choice. It's not that it's not there. The miracles are always there. The awareness, all that's there. But sometimes we're focusing on other things. We're looking the other direction.
Yeah, we have to plug into it. I remember when I was 24, I didn't start college until I was 22, and I was really in a bad way. Some things had happened to me the year before, and I was right. Someone had suggested to me, go get a notebook and start writing. So for months and months, I was just complaining in my journal. And one day I just wrote, what am I supposed to be learning from this? And I started getting all these answers in my journal. And, that I think for me it wasn't that I wasn't spiritual before, because I always was talking to God ever since I was a little kid. But that changed my perception of how the world worked. Oh, so when something bad happens to me, bad in quotes, happens to me, maybe it's not hurting me so much as it's trying to show me something that I need to pay attention to. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Well, if we want to believe what the Course in Miracles says, or, my spiritual practice is that everything can be used for our good. Everything can be used for our expansion. Some people talk about growth, that we're here to learn all these lessons. I see it more as that we're here to expand the consciousness of life, of God, whatever, word you want to use for it. I kind of shy away, you've read my books, from using the word God too much because it has an awful lot of baggage. A lot of people have a lot of associations. Sounds like your father was able to kind of maybe supersede some of that, but I think a lot of people get some baggage. As I said in Course in Miracles, it's not really God I have an objection with. It's kind of his fan club that seems to, be doing things that appear not to be so loving to me. But again, that's my judgment. Again, anytime I judge anything, I'm separating myself from source or from God, from life. So the less I judge, the more I'm able to stay connected to reality or to the life force.
Yes. Yes. Sometimes when things happen or people, I see on the news, somebody doing something that I think is really weird. I go, isn't that interesting? And then just try to separate myself from that. And yeah, it is hard not to judge though, because we're taught to do that. So I agree with you. I have to be vigilant and go, oh, wait a minute. Don't judge. It's all working out for the good of all of us. So you've been on this path for a very long time.
Yeah, I suppose I have been on this path for quite a while. In fact, I can remember even as a child sort of knowing that I was more than this physical body, because this is kind of weird. And I used to not ever tell anybody this, but I've recently mentioned it a couple times. Like I can remember like maybe my parents had had me take a nap or something, and I can remember kind of leaving my body in a sense and being aware of this bigger, higher dimension. And then it's like, okay, do I want to go back or not? And eventually I kind of quit doing that. I mean, again, I think it's, we get enculturated, we put the headset on and we start doing life the way we're taught it is. But I think very early on, I was really aware that I was more than just this little meat suit. I mean, this body, like Course in Miracles says, I'm not a body, I'm free. It doesn't mean we don't have a body. Yes, we all have bodies, but it's not who we are. Who we are is all of our thoughts and our dreams and all these bigger things is at this particular point in time in this material space-time reality, it's, all the bigger part of who we are is coming through this or giving this an opportunity, but it's not at all the truth or the bigger part of who we are, I guess.
Yes. So are there any, since this is story power, are there any stories that you gravitate toward that help you with your realization that you are more than just, your meat suit, your body? What kind of stories do you gravitate toward? Maybe I'm asking.
Well, I think reality tends to form around our perceptions or around our beliefs. And lately I've become really aware of like synchronicities that are happening. And again, some people might call those miracles. Like here's just a tiny little example. The other day I thought, I need a new frame for this particular picture that I had. So yeah, I could have run to the store and bought one, but I just hadn't gotten around to it. And the next thing I know, somebody sends me one in the mail. Or the other day, I wanted these new kind of lawn chairs. So again, one option and what we're taught is that you have to go physically make contact with that. But your thoughts can go out and it can bring that to you. And some people say, oh, that's just coincidence. But is it or not? I like to believe in the bigger miraculous story. So I like to think that material reality forms around our beliefs and our thoughts. So, there's just all these superpositions out there. And, we've chosen one superposition. And at any time, we could go back and connect with all the other superpositions that are available.
Right. So, it's kind of like, are you thinking like multiple timelines? Is that kind of the way you're talking about?
Yeah. Like in the field of infinite potentiality where, I was just heard a thing recently about quantum computing, and you have to be really precise in your arguments. And we don't have quantum computing yet. It's available, but it's not, we don't have it out there that we could buy a quantum computer. But what happens, what they notice, the people that are developing it, you put everything in there really precise, but the minute you stop and look at it, or it stops and it doesn't keep going up into all the infinite possibilities. So in order to do it, you have to really restrain yourself from looking at what's going on, because your observation literally stops it. So, the world is just so much freakier than we recognize. But again, we've chosen the superposition position of the material world. And so, that's kind of what we're dealing with here in these bodies. But I guess the part that's more interesting to me is the bigger world. And, as we're talking, I'm thinking, man, I might sound like a nutcase, well, this stuff's pretty far out there, but this has just happened to be my belief. So I'm just telling you what they are. But some people, if they're not into this stuff, would think, wow, she's loco. But anyway.
Well, but I've read Gary Zukav and Greg Braden and Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and all those kind of people. And I think it's Gary Zukav even wrote a book about quantum physics. And I didn't read that one. I read Seed of the Soul. But Greg Braden is really into the marriage of science and spirituality and how really what we think creates our reality is not a new idea. It's been around for quite a while. So, but
100 years,
Yeah. And so,
ahead, sorry.
No, that's okay. And so it's been around for so long, but it's just now trickling down.
Oh, I couldn't hear what you said. You said it's going down?
It's trickling down into the population.
Trickling down. Yes.
Trickling down into the population. And, I think one of the reasons why I created this podcast is because a lot of the books, movies, television shows that I consume, the artists are somehow connected to what you're talking about, the super soul or whatever, because one of my favorite quotes is from Ben-Hur, and Esther says, the world is more than we know. And I love that. It's so true. The world is more than we know. And you get those little nuggets of insight, or at least I do. I pick them up when I'm reading books or watching movies or television shows. But of course, I curate what I watch or what I read pretty closely. I'm not just reading any old thing, So, that idea that you've been expressing, I know some people are going to go, what? What is she talking about? But it is, it's a scientifically proven fact that what you were talking about, that if you observe something, it changes it. Because I've read scientific articles about that. So going along with that idea that what we observe, we change things. I know that you are a travel writer and you've traveled a lot. Traveling changes your perception of the world. So are you still a travel writer? And do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I guess I'm still a travel writer. I haven't this last year with the pandemic, but I wrote 3 books for National Geographic, and I've done travel writing for, 30 some years. And it's one of my loves. And, as far as one of the things I'm looking forward to, as we kind of start seeing some light at the end of the tunnel of this lockdown we've been in, is to beginning to travel again. I was a person that, went all over the world pretty constantly. And so it's been a real switch to kind of stay home. Mm-hmm. But yes, I love traveling. I, have been to a lot of places, and I've been writing about my journeys, both inner and outer, for a long time. Yeah.
Yes. Because, my husband and I took a trip circumnavigating the globe in 1996, and just traveling to different places, I realized that we're more connected than we are separate. But also there were the artwork that we saw, the people that we talked to, expanded my view of the world, of how humans interact with each other. And you've had a lot of those experiences.
Oh, well, one of my favorite travel articles that I wrote was on Huffington Post, and it was kind of everything I need to know I learned from traveling. So, it was a takeoff on that, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten or whatever that was. But, and one of the things I did learn that I think's, really important to know is what you just said, you realize that all people are much more alike than we are separate. It's just a story that says that person over there is different than you, and it's just a longstanding belief that we've got. And when you travel, all notions that people are so different is disavowed. Very quickly as you travel.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things, one of the 5 things that I learned from traveling, that everything I needed to know, I learned from traveling. So, yeah. So I also realized, how small the world is in a way, because, we think, oh, that exotic culture over there. But, every person in that exotic culture is just like me, so.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember I was teaching in Douglas, which is a border town, Douglas, Arizona. And I said something to my students. I was teaching high school. I said something to my students that we live in an exotic location. And they were like, what? Because the county I live in has Tombstone, Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of people from all over the world go to Tombstone, Arizona. And, and we have other things like the Apaches lived here. And so there's Cochise Stronghold is here. There are all these things in our area, the Chiricahua Mountains. But my students were like, what are you talking about? They didn't understand. And I said, well, you don't see it the way other people around the world see us, You're used to living here and you don't think it's exotic, but other people look at us and say, wow, you're so lucky to live there. And they had a hard time understanding what I was talking about. But
so I've been to Tombstone and I've been to your county. I once did several chapters in a Michelin guidebook. Mm-hmm. And one of the chapters that I was lucky enough to do was Southern Arizona. So I spent quite a bit of time down there in that area. So I'm familiar with where you live. So
yes, that's cool. It has been wonderful living here all these years. And so getting to know the different cultures and, learning about the Apache and the unfortunate things that happened, it's very, it's sort of heavy. That's the heavy feeling about this area. But yeah, and Coronado going through here supposedly. And there's also this other thing about the Huachuca Mountains that there's something about them that has this energy about them. So, and we have views of it right outside our house. So one of the things I found about travel was it's interesting how each place has a different energy to it. I liked being in the new location and learning how the culture worked and feeling the energy and then kind of getting in sync with that. That was really interesting to me. So I imagine you've had that feeling a lot since you travel a lot.
Yeah. Where all did you go when you circumnavigated the globe?
We started in Germany because we had a contact there. We went from there to the Netherlands. We had these were 2 Reiki people that we met in Oregon when we were going to the Reiki retreat. And then from the Netherlands, we went to England and France. Then we went to Greece. We spent 3 weeks in Greece. I love Greece. And then we went to India.
Beautiful.
Oh, it is. We loved it. We had a contact there who he was becoming a priest in the Orthodox Church. So we were in Thessaloniki and we went to the peninsula of Cassandra and spent some time there. But then we went to India. That was really difficult. But we have a friend who lives in Australia. So when we got to Australia, it was like they're set up for tourists and spent some time there. And then we ended it in Japan, where my sister and her family lived at the time. So we spent time in Tokyo before going home. And we sold our house to do it. That was a really interesting thing. We were trying to figure out how we were going to make this trip around the world once we got the idea for it. And I said to my husband, I have an idea how we can pay for our trip because we didn't have a lot of money, And he said, "Oh, I have an idea too. I wonder if it's the same idea." And I said, "We can sell our house." And he goes, "Oh, that's what I was thinking." And so it happened that it was just right when the boom was happening, and we had enough money to go on our trip and then move to Arizona because both our sets of parents lived here, and get our life set up here. And so it was like God was saying, go on this trip. Or I call God divine oneness. That's only how
I like that.
That's how I put it in my journal when I'm addressing my journal. But it's hard to say that when you're talking to people, because they look at you like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And do you still have your blog? What is it? George Clooney Slept Here. Is that your blog, your travel blog?
Yes. It's a takeoff on George Washington Slept Here, which is, of course, what they used to say in the East. Oh, this hotel, George Washington Slept Here. So I just decided I was going to do a luxury travel blog a while back. To be honest, I haven't added anything to it again for a year, but I still do have it. And it was just a way, I write for a lot of, did write for a lot of big magazines, everything from Travel and Leisure to Scientific American Explorations to did a lot of stuff for CNN Travel, Huffington Post, Daily Mail. So in 2008 is when I started the George Clooney Slept Here, kind of everything was upended in the whole print industry with the internet. Magazines were closing, book publishers. So, it was kind of a tight time for me in my life. So I thought, okay, what can I do? So I decided to start this little blog, and that is kind of where it came from. But it's always been something I would do in addition to, the other assignments and things that I did. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a way just to, did. Yeah. So I do still have it. I just haven't added anything to it lately.
I haven't checked it out for a while. I've only read a couple of your posts, and that was pre-pandemic. So I haven't checked it out in a while. But one of the things that I was thinking is, it seemed to me that your travel writing and your spirituality writing go together so well, because travel expands at least if you're open to it, it can expand your view of the world and of people. And so I just, when I found out that you did the travel writing, I was like, oh, well, that just makes so much sense.
Yeah, I've been very, very fortunate. In fact, I would say, I was talking about synchronicities, and, I talk about, the universe is always wanting to bless us, guide us, interact with us. So the reason I became a travel writer is, you were saying you had to figure out how to do this traveling you wanted to do. Well, I also, I knew I loved to travel. My family traveled around in the little station wagon. My father was a minister, so we didn't have money, but we'd pack up the family station wagon. We'd drive all over the place. I'd been to Mexico, been to Canada, but I had not been in an airplane until I was probably in high school. But so anyway, so I really wanted to travel. And of course, I love to write. And really, I literally fell into travel writing. Or I believe it was a sign that the universe showed me, okay, here's how you can afford travel writing, or here's how you can afford to travel, is you love to write anyway, so just write about it. And once you become a travel writer, particularly once you have a portfolio and people see that you write about it, you get invited all kinds of places. I mean, I've stayed in, castles like that, so I've done so many amazing things that on my own budget, I would have never been able to do. So as a travel writer, and one of the magazines I wrote for a lot, I used to joke, I wrote for Modern Bride and Modern Maturity. And at the time I was young and I was unmarried. I'm still unmarried, but I'm not young anymore. So, I'm more the age of modern maturity now. But the point is, so because of bridal stuff, they really would show you the best thing. Because, on your honeymoon, you tend to do the exotic luxury stuff. So I've really been blessed in that I've gotten to do just amazing things in my life. And now, with the success of each squared, it's been translated into 40 languages. Obviously, money's not so much an issue for me, but it used to be. I mean, it used to be, even though I raised my daughter on my own, single mom, with lots of help lots of help from so many people. But the point is, it wasn't like I was swimming in money, but I still was able to travel and doing all these exotic things because that's what I wanted to do. And, I feel like those doors were open for me, like a red carpet just unfurled for me to be able to do all those things.
Yes, really. Well, and I was, while you were talking, I was thinking that, yes, you've had this amazing life and now you're turning it around and trying to help other people with your 222 Foundation. Or am I saying that right?
Yes, that's how I pronounce it, the 222 Foundation, the Pam Grout 222 Foundation.
Because it just seems to me, of course, I have this viewpoint because I have education background in theater. I have way more degrees than I need. And I've been teaching theater and drama and acting for a long, long time. And I was involved in theater. I was an actor. I was a stage manager. I've directed plays. And my husband's an artist. He's a graphic artist and a potter. So it's that whole idea that you have to have creativity in your life is central to our lives, his and my life together. And we don't have any children, but I have tried to instill that in my students, is that you need to have some sort of creativity in your life. And that's one of the pathways to joy, is finding something to create. It could be a garden maybe, or whatever it happens to be. It doesn't have to be art, but the creativity is just a really important component of life. And I'm always sad when people don't understand that, or they poo-poo it. So I'm really happy to hear that you just said, I want to be a travel writer. I want to write. And you just allowed that to happen, because I know sometimes I put blocks in front of myself for that. And I've been trying to clear those blocks out. And all of a sudden, when I got the idea to do this podcast, it was like, oh, everything just sort of fell into place. And I'm not making any money at it, but it doesn't matter because I'm having so much fun doing it.
And that's the important thing. And I think the reason creativity is so important is because I think we're sort of here to express ourselves. And I think, again, the culture paradigm would say, keep it to yourself. Don't let anybody know, follow these rules. And so creativity allows you to jump out of that box in many ways. And in fact, what we're talking about the 222 Foundation, one of its main tenets is that all people are creative and long to give up their gifts. That is one of our tenets. And those are the kind of projects that we look for to fund. And I don't know if you've seen this on my website. I'm in the process of redoing my website, or someone else is actually a designer. Just again, my manifestation just wrote me and said, hey, I've read your books. I would like to design your website for free. I'm like, okay. Because, I haven't updated it. I haven't kept up with it. But on my website, there's a little test. And it's, there's the LSAT to see if you can get into law school. There's the MCAT if you want to be a doctor. There's the SAT to you go to college. Here is my test for if you are creative. It has one question, and it is, are you breathing? And if you answered yes to this question, you are highly creative. So that is the truth. And whether you're talking creative, as in you mentioned the fine arts or the garden, there's so many ways to self-express, to grow and expand. And that is, to me, why we're here. And I think a lot of people don't even recognize that. They think they're going to survive or whatever. But to play with the life force. And I think creativity in whatever way you use it is the way that, you do fulfill whatever your mission is here.
That's right.
In this material time space reality.
Yes, my sister's really great at cooking. She loves trying new recipes, and that's a creative outlet. Yeah, there are so many ways to be creative. And when I was teaching high school, I would say everybody has a genius. It might be that you are the best friend in the world, and I try to get them to think of, you are here for a reason. Your job is to figure out what that is why you're here. So, yeah, I think that was one of the quotes from Art and Soul reloaded was, "Are you breathing? Oh, then you're creative." I remember reading that someplace. Maybe it was on your blog, but I was
it's
laughing.
in the book too, I think.
Yeah, and I love that because it's so true. And being creative in whatever way, it brings you so much joy. At least it brings me joy to be creative. Creativity, I think, is one way that we touch the divine also.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't talk like that when I'm teaching at a government-run institution. But that's my outlook on life. So yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So I'm going to ask you to send me the link for because does the 222 Foundation have a separate website?
It does not. And that is one of the things we're going to put on my blog or on my website. It'll have a prominent place. Yeah. And maybe I'll eventually do a separate website for it. But, at this point, I haven't. I always announce the winners on my blog. Right. And I always ask for the pitches, for people to submit their projects on my blog. Yeah, so far, it's just been, kind of me and Taz doing it. So it's not like, a big institution or whatever,
Yeah, you're kind of a two-person show.
I've always been a DIY person. And I think that that's another area where creativity is really good. If you're willing to do that, you can learn almost anything. And, I think as we get older, we quit wanting to learn and we hire other people to do stuff for us. But just like even I said, this person's designing my website, I was kind of like, do I really want to let it go of it? And all my content will be the same, but she's going to make the graphic part prettier because while I could learn it and I could do it, I probably wouldn't. So, so I took her up on her offer. So
yeah, I have an in-house tech guy. He's done graphics forever. And when I revamped my website, when I wanted to have a tab for my podcast and a tab for my blog and a contact tab, he came in and he even had to contact people at WordPress to get help to redesign it. So we're still not finished with it, but at least it's better than it was. And so it's so great to have a tech person that you can go ask questions. Because sometimes I forget how to do stuff. His office is just right next door to mine. And I can go, can you help me remember how to do this? And so I totally understand that, though, about not wanting to let go of certain things, because that's how I feel, especially with the podcast. But when it comes to designing the website and stuff, I tried to do it myself and I made a huge mess of it. So having him was very helpful. And it just took worry off my mind. I didn't have to think about it. Well, I'm so happy that you agreed to talk to me. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we go?
Oh, no, not at all. One of the things I often say is that I think these kind of conversations are the only kind of conversations worth having, possibility and what could be. So, I pretty much will say yes to almost any. I mean, it depends on, especially now I'm not nearly as busy, with not doing all the travel writing and stuff. So anyway, I was just happy, to have a conversation. So anyway, I have nothing, no agenda, nothing I'm trying to sell, nothing at all.
Well, thank you for being my guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles, at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.